Okay, well, thank you. Thank you again for being here. And if you captured the feeling of that opening treatment, then that's really all we need. The, the power is in the treatment. What I would like to do today, the idea that kind of passed through me today, is really an expansion of where we were last week. Remember last week we were talking about the wide gate and the small gate. And the wide gate leads to destruction, which I rephrased as distractions, right? The distractions. But we're told that the gate is narrow, or the gate is small, and the path is narrow that leads to life, to the kingdom. And this kingdom that we are talking about is not something out there. It's not, you know, like Walt Disney's magical kingdom. It's not castles and things like that. It is a kingdom that is within. It is a place in consciousness. It is a state of being. It could be called illumination. It could be called salvation. It could be called enlightenment. It's called by many different terms because there really aren't words to describe it. We have to keep this in mind. This is most important. Words are a verbal expression of a mental concept, an idea, a thought, a notion. But this experience that we're talking about, the experience of the presence of the divine, is something that takes place in a state of consciousness that exists before words, before thoughts, before notions. In the Buddhist teaching, they have different ways of describing it, but it's kind of like there's original awareness. We may be aware of things, and we all are. In fact, we are aware of more things than our conscious mind tells us about. Right? You know this at night. You're asleep at night and the baby cries and you get up. You know, you get up and you take care of the child. There was a part of you that was listening. You weren't awake. You were in a deep sleep. You may not even have been dreaming. You were in that kind of unconscious mode of sleep. But yet there was something within you that was still awake. There was something within you that was aware, the original presence, the original awareness, the isness, the suchness, the I amness of the different spiritual schools. There is that presence which is beyond words, or before words is probably more appropriate. And it is that presence, it is that experience of that presence that we are talking about as the kingdom. The kingdom. Living in the conscious awareness of the presence of God, the kingdom. And in this place of consciousness, what we want to consider is that in this place of consciousness that we're being told about, in this place of consciousness that we are designing our spiritual practice for the purpose of that experience. That this is the place that is kind of described as living by grace. Living by grace. In other words, we don't have to think about what we need. We don't have to worry about what we need. Take no thought for tomorrow will take care of itself. The birds in the air, the lilies of the field are provided for. How much more so are you provided for? And what we're told in that same the same lines in the Sermon of the Mount are, the Father in heaven knows what you need before you ask. but ask believing in your hearts. Ask believing in your hearts that it is so, and it shall be done. This place of grace, of living in grace and living in the kingdom that we're talking about is a state of consciousness that is so in tune with the infinite that our asking, which is, this is important, our asking is for the purpose of our own acceptance. It's not that God needs us to ask to make God happy in some way, nor does God need us to give thanks so that God can feel better about itself. The purpose of our asking is that we must have our intention and we must accept. But there is a state of being where that asking and that acceptance is such a natural, integral part of us that it just flows. It just flows. Because at this point that we're talking about, this point of living in the kingdom, this point of living in a state of grace, of illumination, of enlightenment, of salvation, however we want to call it. What happens is that our human desires, our humanness, has given way to our divineness, has given way to our spiritual nature. So keep in mind what the Christ means. The Christ is that consciousness where the human consciousness gives way to the divine consciousness, where the human recognizes its own spirituality. In Buddhism, we're told that all sentient beings have the Buddha consciousness, but not all sentient beings have awakened. But yet, all sentient beings have the potential to awaken. And in Christianity, we can recognize then that each and every one of us can come to recognize the presence of the divine within, which would be the Christ consciousness within. And if we take it beyond any traditional religion, we can recognize, even from a secular view, we can recognize that we did not create ourselves, that there is something in operation before we were born, and we can endeavor to know what that is, to experience that. So our intention for our spiritual practice, our intention for our studies, for our time in prayer and meditation and treatment and gratitude, and praying for our enemies and blessing those who would do us harm, and all of the other things that we have been told through the wisdom teachings of the years, they are all for the purpose of us going through the small gate, staying on the narrow paths, entering the kingdom, and staying within the kingdom. So at first what happens to most of us is that first we get little glimpses of this. We get little glimpses of the kingdom. We have a brief moment of timelessness within time. We have a brief moment of that cosmic experience where we know something is there, and we experience it. And then we kind of go back into our day-to-day consciousness, into the human consciousness. If you look at the legends of King Arthur, they're nice as fable, they're nice as mystery, and we like to have these fancy notions of the knights in the shining armor, and they're rescuing the damsels in distress, and all of these other things that Hollywood has given to us. But like many fables, if you step back from them and look at them, they're teaching us a spiritual truth. The quest that the knights are on, whether it be for the Holy Grail or the Holy City, the quest that they are on is the search for the soul. It is the search to discover their true nature, the search to discover their own self with a capital S. And there's one legend, I think it's Sir Gawain, but it may not be, but there's a knight who was on a quest to find the Holy City, you know. Now, the quests are pretty much the same. They have this desire, and they commit themselves to the desire, and they set out on their journey, and they meet many trials and tribulations and challenges along the way, and they must overcome each and every one of them. And either they fail when they go back to Camelot, or they succeed. And in this case, the knight succeeds, and he makes it to the Holy City, and he gets to the Holy City, and the people welcome him. People welcome him as a king. He has come to be their king, and they are so delighted that he is there, and they put him on his throne, and they are treating him royally. And one day, a young page knocks on the door of the castle, and the page goes to the king, and he says, "Sir Knight," he says, "have you forgotten? Have you forgotten your responsibilities back in Camelot? Have you forgotten there are people back there who need you and who depend upon you? You have business to attend to. You can't just leave and never come back." So the king tells the people, he says, "Yes," he says, "the page is right. I have some unfinished business back in the world of Camelot, and I must go take care of it. But as soon as I get the loose ends wrapped up, as soon as I sell off all my property and do all the things that I need to do, I'll be back and I'll be your king, and we'll live happily ever after." And of course the knight goes back to Camelot, and he gets so involved in his day-to-day activities, he forgets about the Holy City, and he never returns. And what the moral of that story, of course, is, you figured it out, is we're all like that. See, we all have that glimpse, and we all have that little taste of the honey, and we say, "Oh yes, yes, this is it. For this moment I have come. This is what I want." And we drift back into our day-to-day activity. But see, the memory is there. The knowledge is there. And it is like the flame that Rumi talks about. It is like the flame that is calling to the moth. There is that knowledge within us, that knowledge that came from experience. It didn't come from a book. It didn't come from a talk. The knowledge that came from personal experience that keeps bringing us back. So our spiritual growth in many cases is this cycle of going into the flame and losing our sense of self, losing our sense of identity, as the moth gives up its mortal body to be united with the flame, is the way Rumi puts it. For that one moment of bliss, to be united with the flame. We go into this experience where the body falls off and the mind falls off, which means our conscious awareness, our attention is no longer on what's going on in our body, and it's no longer on what's going on in our thoughts. Our attention is just completely absorbed in the experience of the divine. So if we look at the world around us, I was reading a little bit of Joel Goldsmith, and he says, you know, if you look at the world around us objectively, and you look at wars, and there's always been wars. You know, there may have been times where great wars, world wars, were not happening. But there's probably never been a time in human history that there hasn't been a war somewhere. And if you look at poverty, and if you look now, you know, at the famines in the world, and if you look at the fact that there's more than enough food available in the world, there's more than enough food to feed all of those who are going hungry, and yet the human race allows some of its members to starve to death. There's medical science available to cure the sick, but we don't get it to them, or we can get it to them, or we won't get it to them. We look at the ways of the world, we look at this and say, oh my goodness, is there really a God? Where's God in the midst of all of this? Right? The problem of evil we talked about a few weeks ago. Why is this happening? And we would come to realize then that either all of the traditional ways, popular ways of thinking about God and spiritual growth, they're not working. So either there is no God, God does not exist, or there must be another way. There must be another way. In other words, the ways of the world are not working. The ways of our humanness are not working. Now, I need to stop right there and just inject this one thought that we have to keep in mind. That we have come into the world of human experience for the purpose of discovering love, discovering our unity with all of life, with all of God. And we have been allowed to remain ignorant of that so that we could develop our unique individual identity, our personality. But it's not ours. It's not ours. We think it's ours. Think of, what was it, that movie, Nurse Betty. Right? The lady, she believed she was the character in the story, but she wasn't. She just believed that. And you and I believe we are the character that we are playing here on this planet Earth. But we are not. We are not. There is something within us that is expressing through that persona. There is something within us that is using that identity for its purpose. But in order for us to create a unique identity, we had to go through this period of believing that it was real. We had to go through this period of believing that we are Nurse Betty. And what we're seeing in the world around us, what we're seeing in all of the atrocities that human beings commit on one another is people still acting out of that false identity. People still acting out of the belief in the reality of their humanity. But everything that they are going through, everything that is happening is leading them and leading us, everything that we're going through, it is leading us into a deeper understanding and a deeper experience of God. And the reason for that is that the first level of consciousness, the first level of organized consciousness, people learn through consequences, or they learn because of consequences. If there are no consequences, typically there's not a whole lot of learning. If everything is going great, don't mess with perfection, right? Why bother trying to find out what you don't know? Everything is going wonderful. We're all happy or satisfied. There's no need to go any further. So when consequences come along, whether the consequences be either positive or negative, then there's typically a thought process involved. In business, we used to teach creativity courses. There was a book we used called A Whack on the Side of the Head. A lot of times people don't stop and think until they get a whack on the side of the head. That's a negative consequence. But a positive consequence could be something really good happen. But eventually people start to think about this cause and effect, and that leads them into their growth. So we look at war, for example, and there have always been wars. And Scripture tells us there will always be wars. At the human level of experience, there will always be wars. Because the root error there is, first of all, an idea of separation from peace, from God. And it's this misguided belief that we can fight our way to peace. We can have a bigger army and therefore we'll have peace until somebody else has a bigger army. And then we have to worry about war. And it goes on and it goes on and it goes on. So what we're seeing happening is, as Einstein so succinctly put it, we're seeing insanity. The world is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. And that is why over all of these thousands and thousands of years that we have had different teachings and philosophies and religions, we're really not seeing a whole lot of change, because people are doing the same misguided thing over and over again. Most, not all, but most are looking out there. They're taking the wide gate. And what we have to come to realize is that enlightenment and salvation and illumination is an individualized or an individual activity. Each one of us, at a time of our own choosing, we must set the intention to open that small gate and to take that path. Then each one of us can separate ourselves from that race consciousness that Dr. Holmes tells us about. We can find that place of living in communion with the divine, where the ideas of struggle and of war and all those things no longer affect us personally. And it's only natural we say, but what about everybody else out there? What do we need to do to go rescue everybody else out there? And of course, that's trying to take care of the splinter in your brother's eye before you've taken care of the plank in your own. You can't give them what you don't have. And the world is just full of people who are trying to give away what they don't have. And that's why things aren't getting a whole lot better. So there comes a time when we have to make our personal commitment to withdraw our consciousness from the activities of the world about us and make that inward journey. This is to me the meaning of the Sabbath, right? We were told, you work 6 days a week, but then you should have the Sabbath. And to me, the meaning of that is there comes a time when it is necessary for us to turn away from all of the distractions of the world, from all of the responsibilities of the world, and we need to go within, and we need to just sit and be with the divine. So the title of the talk was how to use the key to the kingdom. How to use the key. See, the kingdom is there. The kingdom is everywhere present, but people do not see it. This is what Jesus is quoted as saying in the Gospel of Thomas, one of the Gnostic Gospels. Where is the kingdom? Where is this kingdom that we keep talking about? It's here. It's everywhere present. But people do not see it. Well, there's a door that only you can open. I can open mine and you can open yours, but I can't open yours for you and you can't open mine for me. And each of us holds the key. We hold the key that will open our door. But we have to decide to put the key in the lock. We have to decide to turn it. We have to decide to open it. In other terms, it was called rending the veil. Right? The old temples had a very heavy curtain called a veil that separated the general area from the part where God's presence was. Rending the veil, tearing apart everything that separates us in consciousness from the divine. We have to render that veil. And the key that we use is our focused attention, our intention, our deliberate action of taking ourselves away from everything else that's going on in the world and bringing ourselves into a conscious awareness of the presence of God. And if we stop and think about what that is all about, I would say that is probably the most important thing that we have to do in this life, is to find our way to turn our key, find our way to move into that conscious awareness of the presence of the divine that Dr. Holmes tells us about. Right? That's what we're moving towards. That's what we're trying to do. And once we recognize that, we start by taking deliberate periods, kind of the discipline of exercise. You know, if you don't like to exercise, you have to have discipline. You have to bring yourself to doing something, excuse me, that you'd probably rather not be doing. Let me get a drink of water here. So we have to get into that routine. We have to bring ourselves to it. We have to get used to it. We have to make it part of our being, part of our ritual, if you will. And the same thing applies to our meditation, to our deliberate breaks that we take from the distractions of the world, from the business of the world, from the activities of the world. But just like in the scripture, the Sabbath meant one particular day, one particular time, where people would do nothing but focus their attention on God. Eventually we come to realize that this needs to be something that is done all the time. Mindfulness, constant awareness, constantly bringing ourselves back into the awareness of the presence. Excuse me again. We're giving an image through scriptures over and over of the Good Shepherd. Right? The Lord shepherds me, I lack nothing. The Good Shepherd and his flock. And the reason for that was in the Middle East, the lambs, the sheep, and the goats, they were not used for meat, not like we do here, but they were kept. They were kept more like pets. The Good Shepherd knew the names. They had names for each one. They called them by their names like you and I would call our dogs and cats. And the sheep were kept for shearing, for the wool, and the goats were kept for milking, for the milk and the cheese. And if a little one got into trouble, if it started to wander too far, the Good Shepherd would just kind of reach out with the long stick and nudge it back in, bring it back in, kind of giving it the discipline, the learning, the training that it needed in order to protect it. So we want to get this image then that everything that we need has already been provided. But we have to have the desire. We have to desire the experience of the presence of God as much as we would desire a pond if our hair were on fire. It has to become an obsession, a focused obsession of ours. That for this purpose I have come, for this reason I have come. I look at the ways of the world around me and I know that they're not working. I know that there's got to be another way. There's got to be the narrow path. There's got to be the small gate that we're told. And when I look at the teachings that talk about that, they're telling us that that path is a path to go within. Where are you going to meet God? You are not going to meet God out there anywhere. Right? If you're walking down the path and you meet the Buddha, kill him. That's a proverb that comes to us from Buddhism. Because you're not going to meet what you're looking for out there. The only place you're going to find it is in your own consciousness. And the only place in your own consciousness that you're going to find it is back beyond words, back beyond thoughts, back beyond feelings, back beyond the physical body. So once we come to that realization, then it becomes a matter of starting our discipline. Now reading is good. Right? Reading is is a way to give us inspiration. It is a way for us to understand and share in other people's experience. But other people's experience is not going to help us other than to inspire us. But it's good that we read the inspiration until we have our own experience. It's good that we listen to talks and teachers, people who have gone a little bit before us on the path that can explain things to us, you know. I'll give you an example from my life. When I learned how to fly, there was kind of 3 stages. You know, you start by reading books about flying and watching in videotapes back in the 80s. You know, they had these things called VHS, and you could actually rent videotapes from flight instructors in flight schools. So there was this process of kind of gaining information, gathering information, reading inspirational stories, you know, all of these. I think every pilot that's ever learned how to fly has read a book called Stick and Rudder. But you kind of build up this awareness, you kind of build up this information. But then there comes a time when you have to go to an instructor. You have to get into the cockpit with somebody who's experienced, who ride along with you, who's not only experienced in how to fly airplanes, but is experienced in how to teach others to fly airplanes, and how to judge whether or not they're really making progress. And a flight instructor will build upon what you have read, because the flight instructor's been there before. But then there comes a time that you have to go solo. And all of the reading and all of the flight instruction, we're all building up to the point where you go solo. One day, the flight instructor gets out of the plane, says, stay there. The flight instructor gets out of the plane and says, okay, go around one more time. I'll watch you from down here. You're ready to go solo now. And what happens is your learning doesn't stop at that point, because from that point on, everything that you do is kind of moving towards a different learning goal. Maybe it's putting a new rating on your license, an instrument rating, those kind of things. Maybe your next flight is going to be to go cross country. Instead of taking off and landing at the same airport, you take off and you fly 50 or 60 miles, land there, and then take off and come back. You know, all these different things that you practice. You know, maybe one flight is just to practice radio navigation. You know, all these things. And my point is that now your learning is self-directed, and now it's up to you to decide what you want to learn. And in the spiritual realm, we can read inspirational books and they're good, and we can listen to inspirational talks and they're good. And then we can find a teacher and we can study with a teacher, and that's good. But the day comes when we have to go solo. We have to turn within. So here's just some ideas then, carrying forward. And I hope that what we've gotten, if we've got anything so far, I hope that what we've received from this is that this is important. And this is probably the most important thing that we'll ever do in this lifetime. But we have to really want it. We have to desire it. And we have to have the discipline to do it until it becomes a second nature to us. We have to make that time, whether it be a 20-minute period or a 5-minute period or a 10-minute period, if it be once a day or twice a day or 5 times a day. If we can take an hour, maybe we can take a whole Sabbath day, take 1 day a week. Whatever we can take, we have to start where we are and we have to build from there. When our eyes open in the morning, we can start right then. As soon as our consciousness comes out of wherever it was while we were asleep, mine goes some strange places. But wherever it was while we were asleep, when we start to come into awareness that we are in our bedroom, that the light is streaming through the window, maybe the clock radio is blaring in the ear, all of these things. Before we do another thing, before we jump out of bed and go brush our teeth, before we do another thing, we can stop and acknowledge the presence of God. The very love of God is in this room. The very power of God is beating this heart. The very wisdom of God is guiding me what to do this very day. There's a beautiful prayer for compassion that is often quoted from the Dalai Lama. You know, I have woken up. I've been blessed with another day, and I will use this day wisely. I will treat myself with love and everyone I meet with love. And I'm paraphrasing, but you get the idea, right? Before you get out of bed in the morning, this is the day the Lord has made. I shall rejoice, and I will be glad in it. Right? This is your intention. This is your intention for the day, is to recognize the presence and the activity of God in everyone and everything and in the mirror. And then as we go through the day, gratitude is the practice. Gratitude. Focused attention, mindfulness, awareness. The breath we take, the breath we give. We are grateful for the air we receive. We give joyfully back to the plants. We are part of the cycle of life, you see. We are bringing ourselves into a conscious awareness, into a mindfulness. The food we eat, we recognize it is a blessing of God. Not only is it a miracle that the sunshine and the rain somehow managed to get themselves into this very form of the breakfast that we're eating, but all of the people who are involved in producing it and shipping it and preparing it. Through that one simple bowl of cereal, we are connected to the miracle of life, to the whole world. We give thanks. We are grateful. To the wisdom that exists within our own bodies, that knows how to take this food and turn it into muscle or to bone or to energy or to whatever we need at that moment in time. Dr. Frederick Bales was trained to be a physician, and he became a minister. And he said, you know, if you received a wound and you bled, and I told you to go back home and make sure that you take in all of the right nutrients to restore the blood in your body, you wouldn't have a clue what to do. You wouldn't know what to do. But the body takes care of that naturally. It increases your thirst, so you'll drink more water. It gives you a desire for salty foods so that you take in the salt that you need to replace the chemicals in the blood. And your body has a wisdom within it that knows exactly what to do if you will learn how to listen to it. There's a wisdom within us that knows how to digest everything that we eat, and we can be grateful for it. Before we go through a door, Joel Goldsmith tells us this, before we go through a door, we can bless what's on the other side. We can be thankful. We can be grateful because whatever door we go through, we're only going to meet God. We're only going to meet God no matter where we go, no matter what we do. And we have to remind ourselves of this. You know, we may start out and do fine until we get onto the freeway, and then suddenly it's all gone. You know, now we're out there doing battle with everybody who's trying to cut us off. We have to remind ourselves we have to back up. Divine love has gone before me and made the crooked way straight. Divine protection guides me and guards me. Divine love takes me where I need to be to do its work. So what happens is, as we start to do this, as we practice this gratitude, this mindfulness all of the time, we keep bringing ourselves back to it, and it may take a period of a month or 2 months before we are doing it all the time, that we are praying without ceasing. We are doing it naturally. We don't even have to stop and and make ourselves think about it. See, then we're starting to get into the flow of life. And then life flows through us without us having to stop and say, well, this is what I want today. This is what I need today. That which knows everything takes care of us, takes care of business. If we do have a problem, if something does arise in our lives, what we do is we look at that and say, well, wait a second now. What's that all about? And we don't have to dig into it too deeply. We don't have to go back to when we were 5 years old and had a traumatic experience and things like that. We just have to know that if this thing called a problem has come up in our lives, it is an opportunity for us to recognize that there must be an idea of separation somewhere in consciousness that is associated with that problem, because all of our problems come from ideas of separation. And instead of worrying about what that idea of separation might have been, we just simply give our consciousness the antidote. We do our spiritual practice. We do our treatment. And we contemplate on the truth about God that is the opposite of the problem. So if it's a problem with finances, we can recognize that God's supply is unlimited. God's goodness flows easily. The sunshine is not constrained or restricted, and that produces all of the life on earth. So there's no restriction in the mind of God. There's no restriction in the flow of God. Therefore, there can be nothing real that is blocking the flow in my life, and I open myself up and let that flow through. See, so everything about us then becomes an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to experience more dearly the presence of God. So the key then to the kingdom is your focused attention. It is your deliberate intention. It is your conscious use of mind to turn your attention onto the things you want and to turn your attention away from the things you don't want. Stop worrying about the world. The world is the way it is because everybody has gone through the wide gate. Don't follow them and worry with them. Turn around. Come back through the small gate. Give yourself that break. Give yourself that Sabbath break where you turn away. Read, study, listen to tapes, listen to talks. Do everything you need to do to get yourself fired up and motivated and enthusiastic about this great adventure. But take your time to go within. Expand your practice from momentary breaks, even if the break is only 30 seconds during the day. To stop and remind yourself that God is here, and God is now. But bring yourself into a constant mindfulness, a constant awareness, a constant blessing, a constant gratitude, a constant thanking for the awareness of the presence of God. Allow yourself to come into that conscious contact, to that communion where you start to enter into the flow, enter into the grace. And then there's no doubt. See, then there's no doubt when that occurs, and you know it's there. And if you drift back a little bit and you come back into getting caught up into human consciousness, it's okay. It's part of the cycle. Just bring yourself back again. Bring yourself back again. And each time you enter into the mystical presence, each time will be a little bit longer that you can stay there, a little bit deeper. And then if you come back, that's fine. If you don't come back, that's even better. So the key then is your intention, your desire, your discipline to do the things that need to be done. As Emmett Fox says, turn away from the problem and turn to God. Keep your mind on the things you want and keep your mind off of the things that you don't want. We have to consider then that we as human beings have been given the key of self-awareness. We can think about what we're thinking about, and that's the key. See, that is the key. Other creatures, as far as we know, can't do that. But we can. So we have to do the one thing that we're capable of doing that no other creature that we know of is capable of doing, and that is to know ourselves. To know what it is that we're thinking. To know ourselves at that place where thinking stops. To know ourselves at that place where the body stops. Where all that is left is the isness, is the suchness, is the presence of God. We are told, I am with you always, even until the end of time. What has been with you always? Who has been with you always? When you were 2 years old, who was looking through your eyes? When you were 20 years old, who was looking through your eyes? When you were 50 years old, who was looking through your eyes? And we must recognize then what we're taught from the East. You are the one who is witnessing. The I that is with you always is the I who is witnessing, the observer, the very presence of the divine expressing itself as you, through you. So I invite you then this week, if it is appropriate, if you haven't already done so, please intensify your desire to know God. Give a little bit more time to your spiritual practice. Bring yourself into a constant awareness of the presence of God in everything you do and everyone you meet. As you're tending in your garden, as you're preparing meals, as you're consuming meals. I am with you always. Find that one who is with you always and don't let it go. And so it is.